Hi everyone, I'm Alexander Zeitlin, and this is the Lockdown Lecture Series for beginner cello, adapted from the Alias Music Introductions course. And this is actually our very last lecture of the entire series, so we're almost all the way through here. We will be by the end of this lecture. So normally we start with a review of what we did last time. Let's take a look at what we did. We went over bow distribution and how that deals with rhythm. We went over sharps and flats and how to deal with extensions. And then I gave you section markings with a couple of like warnings for extension positions for your fingers, and then gave you section markings all the way through the end of the piece. So normally, next what I would do is I would have all the strings and fingers written in, and you guys could check against what I wrote to see if you're correct, but I'm not going to do that this time. We have been working for so long. I think I'm going to give you two bonus things before we check through the entire minuet. So one is we're going to talk about how to transition from reading strings and fingers to just looking at the notes and doing it in your head. So basically, so far, whenever you guys play, you have been reading the letters and numbers down here, which is fine. You're essentially reading a translation of the original notes. But as you get to more advanced music, you will have things like articulation markings, staccato markings, accents, dynamics, tempo changes, all kinds of things marked over your notes. And if you're looking at your letters and numbers, you will miss them. So we want to start to transition, as soon as we can, to just reading the notes off the page, which means that your page will eventually just look like this, which might seem a little scary, and it is at first, because learning to read without writing in numbers and fingers is kind of like learning to read music all over again. Like, it's slow at first, but I promise you won't be slow for long. Usually after a few weeks, you're already pretty decent at it. Within a month or two, you will forget that you have ever used strings and fingers. So let's take a look at how we're going to do that and learn some strategies. And then at the end of that, I will play through the entire minuet. You guys can play along with me. So when I look at our scale, I want to remember two things, because you guys are now really good at remembering the sequence of notes that we need to play. All of these notes, these are basically all the natural notes that you can play in first position on the cello. Now, I should make note of two things. First of all, where are my open strings? So for example, A0 is up here on the top line, D0 is here on the middle line, G0 on the bottom line, and C0 two ledger lines below the staff. That's where my open strings are. Now, if I need to, just as a helpful hint, let's say I'm working on the B sections and I don't have any fingerings written in. I'm just going to, at the beginning of the staff, just write in where my open strings are. Just like write a little note right here, little note right here, little note right here, and then a little note right here. There's all my open strings. So now I can just kind of use this as a reference, because if I know where my open string is, for example, right here, if that's A0, then I know that the note right above it is A1. So all the notes that step up and down, I can kind of count to them more easily from my open strings. And every time there's a jump, like over here, I can use my open strings to figure that out. Now, one word of warning, you guys notice that in the scale, we don't use all the fingers, right? We talked about a little bit about that last time. There's always, a 0, a 1, but then there's a 2 or a 3. And then there's always a 4. Okay, so for all your natural notes. So for example, on the C string we have a 3 but not a 2. G string we have a 3 but not a 2. D string we have a 2 but not a 3. On the A string we have a 2 but not a 3. And the next note higher than this would be 4. So you have to keep that in mind, because as you're counting down, you have to remember which strings have 3 and 2. So let's figure out a few of the notes together kind of in our heads here. So this was A1, like we mentioned, right? Now the next note goes down 2. So if this is A1, then this would be A0 on the line, and then this would be D4, because that goes below A0. Then it goes up 1 to A0, up 1 to A1, back down A0, D4, back to A0. And then there's a big jump. And like I said, I'm going to try to imagine where's my open string. It's on the middle space right here, or middle line right here. So that's actually D0 right there. So that's D0, and I continue. D0, D1. And then when I hit this note right here, I look and I say, oh, that should be D2, but oh yeah, I remember I have F sharps. And so that means that all my D2s are D3s. So that's actually right here, that is a D3. And that's how I work on reading all my notes. And the best time to do that is like on your very first try when you're looking at a section and you're trying to figure out the notes for the very first time. I recommend just saying them out loud. Normally you just play long bows anyway. Instead of writing in the notes, you're just going to say them instead of writing them down. It's going to sound like this. You're going to look at it and go A1, D4, A0, A1, and just kind of gets you thinking and processing the notes. And then usually after you do it once, you probably don't need to do it again. You can just do it in your head from that point on. Then you practice it as you normally would. 3 times long bows, 3 times you add the rhythm. So that's how you're going to tackle reading the notes in your head. Now, you might find that some sections are really hard. You really want to write in all the fingerings. But some sections I recommend try and work it out without writing in fingerings. So, all that being said, let's pause and play through the entire minuet. So you guys try and keep up, see how you did. And then I have one more bonus thing at the end. So here is the entire minuet, beginning to end. So if you kept up, congratulations. You learned your first classical piece. And if not, keep practicing. You will get it soon. So I have one more thing to share with you guys in this series. So far, we've just been playing separated notes, like separate bows for everything. And that is actually an articulation. Articulation is how we attack the note, like how we separate the note. Think of articulations as the consonants in our words. Now, there are three main articulations. There's détaché, which just means detached notes. That's what we've been doing. There's staccato notes, and staccato notes are separated notes, like if you play notes that are just short and separated. And then there's also legato, and legato markings look like this. Let me mark it in a different color. There we go. So they look like a half circle connecting a whole bunch of notes. And to do that, basically what it does, if I were to take the first four notes and just play them separate bows, sounds like this. They're separated. But if I were to mark a legato marking here and essentially slur them, we'll call it also slurring, it sounds like this. So you can tell they're much more played together. So what we're going to do is we're going to play our entire scale, 4 notes on a bow. It's kind of easy to see because the notes are already grouped into 4/8 notes at a time. But I'm just going to mark slurs, and you guys can write in slurs in your parts. Now, let me go over just a couple hints for playing slurs successfully. I suggest kind of preparing mentally for all 4 notes before you start. So like think to yourself, C0, C1, C3, C4, and then play. I just move my bow slowly and I change the fingers. G0, G1, G3, G4. Move your bow slow and don't run out of bow. D0, D1, D2, D4. A0, A1, A2, A1. Now, this one's particularly, you have to be careful because you're going to play A0 and then D4, D2, D1. You're going to change strings in the middle of the bow. It sounds like this. Change. Now, when you change strings, you're going to want to change bow, but just go slow and make sure you don't change your bow. And it's going to end up sounding like this. Here's the whole thing. Get good at it, I recommend, challenge you guys to then play 8 on a bow, which would sound like this. Just think of it as 2 groups of 4, or even 16, which would sound like this. So that's the last little bit we're going to go over, and that concludes our entire beginner lecture series. I would say you guys are, if you guys have done all this, you are probably like 80% of the way through, being a beginner. Like if you work a little bit more, I would expect most beginners, I would want to see them do a slightly more substantial piece, maybe like an entire beginner concerto movement with slightly more, advanced bowings with slurs and some maybe like 16th note rhythms here and there. But you're really almost there. Like after the minuet, it's not much farther to go. And then you're ready for the intermediate stuff, which is, higher positions, playing higher positions, vibrato, more advanced articulations, more advanced technique. So it's the very beginning of a long journey of music. I hope you guys have had fun, and hope to see you guys in class and in more lecture series. And keep up the practicing. I'll see you guys later.